Last year, a man pulled into my bay with a P0420 code and a dealership estimate that made his hands shake. $1,200 for a new converter. He had already accepted it, already moved money around in his checking account, already grieved the loss. I looked at his maintenance history, asked him 3 questions about his driving habits, and told him to come back in 48 hours. He left 2 days later with the same converter, $0 spent, and a check engine light that has stayed off for over a year now. What I asked him to do required no tools, no lift, no parts, and about 20 minutes of his time. Here's the belief I need to destroy in your mind right now. You think a catalytic converter is binary. You think it works or it does not, the same way a light bulb either glows or sits dark in the socket. That mental model has cost American drivers hundreds of millions of dollars in unnecessary replacements. A converter does not fail like a switch being flipped. It suffocates. Slowly. Over tens of thousands of miles, carbon deposits and unburned fuel residue creep into the ceramic honeycomb structure inside it, closing off thousands of tiny passages one by one, quietly, invisibly, until your car throws a code and you assume the whole unit is finished. The sluggish acceleration you feel merging onto the highway, the fuel economy that dropped 3 miles per gallon for no obvious reason, the faint sulfur smell under hard throttle, that hesitation when you try to pass someone and the car seems to pause and think about whether it wants to help you. None of those symptoms mean your converter is dead. They mean it is choking. And a choking converter is a problem that was solved a long time ago in a country that treats automotive longevity as a matter of national engineering pride rather than a parts sales opportunity. Here is what $1,200 actually buys at a dealership service counter. It buys a catalytic converter that costs the parts department somewhere between $300 and $400 wholesale. It buys 90 minutes of labor, billed at $160 an hour, and it buys silence about the fact that the part being removed might have had another 50,000 miles in it if someone had simply told you to drive differently for one afternoon. Run the numbers yourself. A Toyota Camry converter replacement invoices at $800 to $1,500 depending on year and trim. A Lexus pushes past $2,000. Multiply that across a dealership, writing 4 or 5 of these jobs per week, and you are looking at a revenue line north of $300,000 a year from a single diagnostic code. 0420. Catalyst system efficiency below threshold. That 6-character string is worth more to a service department than most of their oil change customers combined. Nobody inside that building gets a bonus for telling you the converter can recover on its own. The scan tool flags low efficiency, the service advisor prints a quote, and the path forward is a new part and a signature on a credit card slip. The system does not reward curiosity, it rewards throughput. But here is the math that should make you angry. Your catalytic converter reaches full self-cleaning capability at 800 to 900 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, the platinum and palladium coating activates completely, carbon deposits literally combust inside the honeycomb structure and the passages clear themselves. This was not an accident of engineering. It was designed into the part from the beginning. The converter was built to regenerate, the same way a self-cleaning oven burns residue off its walls when you run the cycle. Japanese mechanics documented this in the 1980s. They watched fleets of city taxis throw P0420 codes, while highway delivery vehicles with identical engines and twice the mileage never triggered the light once. The variable was not age, it was not parts quality, it was sustained heat exposure. The taxis never got hot enough. The highway vehicles cleaned themselves every single day without anyone turning a wrench. That observation has been circulating through Japanese workshop culture for 4 decades. One real-world case sits in my own comment section. A man with a 2003 Nissan Xterra quoted $2,500 for a full converter replacement, refused the job, drove sustained highway sessions for a few weeks, and watched the engine light disappear permanently. 4 years later, it has never returned. His cost was gasoline and time. The dealership would have collected $2,500 for a problem that did not require a single new part. Here's the part that nobody at the service counter will explain, because explaining it eliminates the transaction. Your catalytic converter was engineered with a self-cleaning cycle built into its operating parameters. You already own the mechanism. You have owned it since the day you drove off the lot. The only missing input is heat, sustained heat, at a threshold your normal commute never reaches. City, driving holds the converter around 400 to 500 degrees Celsius. Warm enough to function. Never hot enough to burn off what accumulates inside those honeycomb passages over 50,000 miles of stop-and-go ownership. So the carbon builds, the flow narrows. Fuel economy drops a percentage point at a time, so gradually you blame the gas station, the season, the tire pressure. And then one morning the light appears on your dash, and someone in a polo shirt quotes you $1,200 like they are doing you a favor. What Japanese mechanics understood decades ago is that the cleaning cycle requires one uninterrupted highway run, 15 to 20 minutes. RPM held between 3,000 and 3,500 in a lower gear than your transmission would naturally select. Sport mode, manual mode, a downshift on a stick. The exhaust flow multiplies. The temperature climbs past the threshold where deposits cannot survive. That is it. No lift required, no scan tool, no parts. The word that matters is continuous. I have had people tell me they split it into 2 10-minute sessions on separate days, and nothing changed. That is like heating water to 180 degrees on Tuesday, letting it cool, then heating it to 180 again on Thursday, and wondering why it never boiled. The thermal event has to be sustained in one pass for the chemistry to complete. So ask yourself a simple question. If the solution lives inside a machine you already paid for, and the only cost is 20 minutes of fuel on an open road, who profits when you never learn that? The answer is everyone standing between you and that knowledge. The parts counter, the diagnostic fee, the labor rate. They are not selling you a fix. They are selling you ignorance of what you already possess. And the Japanese method layers one more element on top of that foundation, a chemical assist that makes the thermal cycle even more decisive. Here's the move that costs you 20 minutes and $40, and it is so boring that most people will not do it. That is exactly why it works. You're not performing surgery. You are running a cleaning cycle the same way you would run one on a dishwasher, except the dishwasher is your exhaust system, and the rinse aid is a catalytic converter cleaner. You buy off the shelf at any parts store. Pour it into a half tank of fuel. Then you drive. Not around town, not to the grocery store. You get on the highway, you downshift one gear lower than you normally would, and you hold between 3,000 and 4,000 RPM for a solid 30 minutes. That is the entire procedure. No lift, no jack, no wrench. The additive loosens carbon deposits from the inside of the honeycomb substrate. The sustained heat from high RPM exhaust flow combusts what the additive has broken free. One without the other does a partial job. Together, they do what Japanese mechanics have relied on since the 80s. Now here's how you confirm it actually did something, because faith is not a diagnostic tool. You need a basic OBD2 scanner. $25. There's no rational excuse not to own one when a single dealership visit costs you 4 times. That, just to read the same data? Plug it in after your highway run and pull live sensor readings. You are looking at the downstream oxygen sensor on bank 1. On a converter that is doing its job, that downstream signal sits relatively flat and stable, while the upstream sensor fluctuates constantly. If your downstream reading is calmer after the treatment than it was before, your converter efficiency is climbing back toward spec. That is not a feeling. That is a number on a screen telling you the precious metals inside are catalyzing again. The check engine light will not vanish the moment you pull off the highway. The computer needs several complete drive cycles to reassess converter performance. If the technique took hold, your P0420 code stays gone within the next 100 to 150 miles of normal driving. If it returns inside that window, you're dealing with something this procedure cannot fix, and that distinction matters. But you will not know which category you fall into until you execute the steps, exactly as described. 1 additive treatment, 1 sustained highway run at elevated RPM, 1 scanner check afterward. The whole sequence takes less time than sitting in a service department waiting room, and it either saves you $1,200 or it gives you a definitive answer that no amount of guessing from your driver's seat ever would. Either outcome puts you ahead of where you were yesterday, which is staring at a dashboard light and hoping it resolves itself. During that highway run, you may catch a brief sulfurous smell from the tailpipe, slightly sharp, slightly acrid. It fades in minutes. That is not damage. That is deposits leaving. The fact that it smells unpleasant is precisely the confirmation that material, which had no business staying inside your converter, is now gone. Sometimes the honest answer is that you already lost. I want to say that clearly before anything else, because I refuse to be the guy who sells you a miracle on a road that dead ends at a junkyard. If your P0420 code comes back within a few hundred miles after you ran the highway treatment, that converter is not clogged. It is broken. If you hear a metallic rattle underneath the chassis, the ceramic substrate has fractured into pieces no amount of heat will reassemble. If your upstream oxygen sensor reads flat, combustion itself has gone sideways, and no 20-minute drive fixes a problem that lives upstream of the exhaust. Those are your exit signals. Recognize them the way you would recognize a bill that has already been paid. You do not negotiate with a receipt. Now carry this forward. The engineers who designed your Toyota or Honda catalytic converter built a self-cleaning cycle directly into the hardware. Sustained high-temperature operation burns deposits off the honeycomb. That is not a hack. That is the system functioning as intended.